G'day everyone. I'm here today to share something that's been weighing heavy on my heart. You know, sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in the most ordinary places. And today, I want to tell you about Margaret, an 83-year-old grandmother from Brisbane, whose family almost threw away what would become the most precious treasure they'd ever find. Before I dive in, I need you to think about your own grandparents for a moment. Picture their faces, their hands, the way they smelled like lavender or aftershave. Because this story, it's going to make you want to call them tonight. Margaret lived in a modest weatherboard home in Paddington, surrounded by 3 generations of family who visited every Sunday for their traditional roast dinner. Her son David, 58, worked in mining and prided himself on being practical. Her daughter-in-law Sarah was always rushing, always checking her phone, always talking about renovating something in their modern apartment in South Bank. Then there were the grandchildren, Emma, 23, fresh out of university with dreams bigger than Queensland itself, and James, 19, who spoke in abbreviations and lived through his Instagram stories. Now, Margaret had this diary, an old leather-bound thing, cracked and faded, that she'd kept for over 60 years. She'd write in it every morning with her tea, using the same fountain pen her late husband Harold had given her in 1963. The family knew about the diary, of course. They'd roll their eyes when Margaret would reference it during conversations. "Oh, Mum's writing her memoirs again," David would joke to Sarah when they thought Margaret couldn't hear. Emma would smirk and whisper to James, "Grandma's ancient diary probably just says had toast every day for 60 years. But here's where the story takes a turn that will break your heart before it heals it. Last March, Margaret fell in her garden while tending to her beloved roses, the same roses Harold had planted for their 25th wedding anniversary. The fall wasn't serious, thank God, but it was enough for the family to have the conversation. "Mum can't live alone anymore," David declared during one of their family meetings. "She's becoming a safety risk to herself." Sarah, scrolling through real estate apps, found a lovely retirement community in Toowong. "Look, David, they have activities, proper medical care, and she'd make friends with people her own age." Margaret sat quietly during these discussions, her weathered hands folded in her lap, that old diary resting beside her like a faithful companion. When they asked for her opinion, she simply said, "Whatever you think is best, love. I just want to make sure my diary comes with me." Emma, barely looking up from her phone, laughed. "Grandma, you'll be starting fresh. Maybe it's time to let go of old things and embrace the digital age. I could teach you to blog instead." The moving day was set for a Saturday in April. The family arrived like a well-organized army, armed with boxes, packing tape, and the absolute certainty that they were doing the right thing. Margaret watched from her favorite armchair as they sorted through 60 years of memories. Keep, donate, or bin became the ruthless mantra of the day. When Sarah picked up the diary, she held it like it might contaminate her. "Margaret, sweetheart, this old thing is falling apart. Surely we don't need to pack this? The retirement home has limited space, and you'll want room for important things." David nodded in agreement. "Mum, you'll be making new memories. Maybe it's time to start a fresh chapter without carrying all this old baggage." Now, I want you to pause this video for just a moment. Look around your own home. Is there something, maybe it's old, maybe it seems insignificant to others, that holds your entire world together? Something that connects you to who you used to be, to the people you've loved, to the dreams you've carried? Hold that thought, because Margaret's story is about to show us why these seemingly small treasures matter more than we could ever imagine. And if you're feeling that tug in your chest right now, that little voice saying don't throw it away, trust it. Sometimes our hearts know what our minds haven't figured out yet. Hit that like button if you've ever felt misunderstood about something precious to you, and let's continue Margaret's journey together. Welcome back, friends. I can see from your comments that Margaret's story is already touching hearts, and honestly, that gives me so much hope. Because what happened next? Well, it changed everything for this Brisbane family. 3 weeks after Margaret had settled into her new room at the retirement community, Emma was cleaning out the last boxes from her grandmother's house before the final handover to the new owners. She was working alone that day. David was on site at the mine, Sarah was at her book club, and James was at university. Emma had always been the responsible one, the one who got things done without drama. Now, Emma found herself in Margaret's bedroom, boxing up the last remnants of a life fully lived. And there, wedged between the mattress and bed frame, was something that made her heart skip a beat. The diary. Margaret's precious diary that the family had unanimously decided to forget during the move. Emma's first instinct was to add it to the donation pile. After all, the decision had been made, and Margaret seemed to be adjusting well to her new life. But something, maybe it was the afternoon light streaming through Margaret's lace curtains, or maybe it was the faint scent of Harold's cologne that still lingered in the room, made her pause. "I need you to understand," Emma would later tell me through tears. "I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. I wanted to understand what was so special about this old book that Grandma carried it everywhere for 60 years. She opened to a random page, dated March 15, 1987. "Today I watched David teaching little Emma to ride her bike in the park. She fell 7 times, but every time, she got back up with this determined look that reminded me so much of Harold. David doesn't see it yet, but Emma has her grandfather's stubborn courage. She's going to do something magnificent with her life. I wrote her a letter today for when she turns 25, telling her about the strength I see in her. I'll hide it somewhere safe until she's ready." Emma's hands began to shake. Flipping through the pages with growing amazement, Emma discovered that the diary wasn't just Margaret's daily musings. Hidden between the pages, carefully preserved with tissue paper, were dozens of letters. Letters addressed to David for his 40th birthday, letters for Sarah thanking her for loving David so completely, letters for James explaining the family history he'd never bothered to ask about, and yes, letters for Emma herself, including one for her upcoming 25th birthday that was just 2 months away. But there was more. So much more. Margaret had documented every family milestone, every struggle, every triumph, but not just as memories, as love letters to the future. She'd written about David's first day of school, his teenage rebellion, his wedding day, the birth of his children. She'd captured Sarah's evolution from nervous daughter-in-law to beloved family member. She'd recorded James's first words, Emma's graduation speech, family jokes that had been forgotten by everyone except Margaret. One entry from 1995 made Emma sink onto Margaret's bed and sob. "David came home today feeling defeated. The company laid off half his crew, and he's terrified he can't provide for his family. He didn't say this to Sarah, he's too proud, but I see the fear in his eyes. I remember Harold carrying this same weight during the recession of '82. Men think they have to be mountains, but sometimes mountains need to lean on each other. I'm going to tell David about his father's struggles tomorrow, and how Harold's courage in those dark times taught me that love isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and showing up anyway." Emma realized that Margaret had been the family's emotional historian, the keeper of not just facts, but feelings. The diary revealed a woman who had spent 60 years studying her family with the dedication of a scientist and the heart of a poet. But perhaps the most devastating discovery came in the recent entries. Margaret had been writing about the move, about feeling like a burden, about wondering if her stories and memories mattered to anyone anymore. One entry from just a week before her fall read, "I think my time as the family storyteller is ending. The children are so busy with their own lives, and I understand that. But sometimes I worry that when I'm gone, all these stories will die with me. Who will remember that David got his sense of humor from Harold's father? Who will tell Emma about her great-grandmother's courage during the war? Who will help James understand that his restless spirit comes from a long line of dreamers and adventurers?" Friends, I had to stop writing this script 3 times because my eyes kept filling up. How many of us have dismissed someone's stories as just old memories? How many precious voices have we silenced without even realizing it? If you're watching this and you still have grandparents, parents, or elders in your life, please, I'm begging you, ask them to tell you their stories. Not tomorrow, not next week, but tonight. because Margaret's diary taught her family something that I want to share with all of you right now. Give this video a thumbs up if you're feeling grateful for the storytellers in your own life, and if you're ready to discover how this family turned their biggest mistake into their greatest blessing, because Emma's discovery was just the beginning. Right, my beautiful viewers, here we are at the heart of Margaret's story, and I promise you, what this family did next will restore your faith in the power of love, humility, and second chances. Emma sat in Margaret's empty bedroom for 3 hours that afternoon, reading entry after entry, letter after letter. By the time the sun set, she understood that her family hadn't just packed away an old diary, they'd nearly discarded a treasure trove of love, wisdom, and connection that could never be replaced. But Emma faced a dilemma. How do you tell your family that you've all made a terrible mistake? How do you admit that you've dismissed someone precious as irrelevant? Emma told me later that this was the first time in her adult life that she felt truly ashamed of herself. Not embarrassed, not regretful, ashamed. Because she realized that in her rush to build her own future, she'd been willing to erase her grandmother's past. That night, Emma made 3 phone calls. The first call was to James. "Mate, I need you to come to Grandma's house right now. I found something, and, just trust me, you need to see this." James arrived expecting to help load a final box into the ute. Instead, he found his sister red-eyed and clutching their grandmother's diary like it was made of gold. "James, we stuffed up. We really, really stuffed up." She showed him the letters addressed to him, letters about his artistic talents that Margaret had noticed since he was 5, letters about family members who had shared his creative spirit, letters explaining that his restlessness wasn't a flaw but a gift inherited from generations of family innovators. James, who hadn't cried since he was 12, broke down completely. "Emma, she knows me better than I know myself. How could we have thrown this away?" The second call was to their parents. "Dad, Mum, can you both come to Grandma's house tonight? I know it's late, but, please, I found something that changes everything." David arrived grumpy, Sarah arrived worried, and both left transformed. When Emma read aloud Margaret's entries about David's fears during difficult times, about how she'd watched him grow from an uncertain young father into a man of quiet strength, David wept in a way his children had never seen. When Sarah heard Margaret's words of gratitude for bringing joy and laughter into David's serious nature, for loving the family not just as obligation but as choice, she understood that she'd been seen and appreciated in ways she'd never recognized. What happened next, I told my viewers, shows you the kind of people this Brisbane family really are at their core. They made a plan, not just to return the diary to Margaret, but to show her that her stories, her wisdom, and her love letters to the future were not just wanted, they were desperately needed. David took leave from work. Sarah cancelled her social commitments. Emma postponed a job interview. James skipped his university classes. For one full week, they turned Margaret's retirement community room into a storytelling sanctuary. They brought recording equipment, photo albums, and most importantly, they brought questions. Real questions. Hungry questions. "Grandma, tell us about your first date with Grandpa Harold. What was it like raising Dad during the 1970s? What did your mother teach you about being strong? What do you want us to remember about you?" Margaret, initially confused by the sudden attention, began to bloom like her beloved roses after rain. For 6 decades, she'd been storing up stories, and now she finally had an audience that wasn't just listening, they were learning. James discovered that his great-great-grandfather had been a traveling photographer in the 1920s, explaining his own passion for visual storytelling. Emma learned about her namesake great-aunt Emma, who had been the first woman in their family to attend university, back in 1943. David heard stories about his father that Margaret had never shared, about Harold's gentle moments, his secret fears, his enormous pride in his son. On the last day of their storytelling week, Margaret presented Emma with an envelope. "This was supposed to wait until your 25th birthday, but I think now is the right time." Inside was a letter that began, "My dearest Emma, By the time you read this, you'll have learned that the most important inheritances aren't money or property. They're stories, values, and the knowledge that you come from a long line of people who loved fiercely and lived bravely. The family made changes. Margaret moved back to her Paddington home, but now it became the family's official gathering place. Sunday dinners transformed into storytelling sessions. Margaret began writing new entries in her diary, but now she had co-authors. Emma helped her type some entries, James illustrated others, David added his own memories, and Sarah contributed her perspective as someone who had married into this beautiful, complex family story. Beautiful souls, I'm going to leave you with this. Margaret's family learned that dismissing someone's stories is like throwing away a library. Every person over 65 carries within them a collection of experiences, wisdom, and love that can never be replicated. If this story has touched your heart, I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to comment below and tell me, whose stories are you going to ask for this week? Whose wisdom are you going to seek? Whose love letters to the future are you going to help them write? And if you're someone whose stories feel forgotten, know that there are people in your life who need to hear them. Your memories aren't just nostalgia, they're guidebooks for the people you love. Hit that subscribe button if you believe every soul carries wisdom worth listening to, because I have more stories like Margaret's, and I think we all need reminding that in a world moving so fast, sometimes the most revolutionary thing we can do is slow down and listen to each other. Thank you for letting me share Margaret's story with you. Until next time, keep listening, keep loving, and keep believing that every story matters. Oh, and Margaret wanted me to tell you all something. She started a new diary entry tradition. Every night, she writes one thing she's grateful for about each family member. Because, as she puts it, love isn't just something you feel, it's something you document, so it can never be forgotten.